please.
Yep.
Methodist Church here in Tavares. We were just talking before the service about how neat it is, really how I think uplifting and encouraging that we have still, even in the midst of social isolation, have been able to gather together. That hopefully, as you're in front of your phone or television screen or your computer screen, there are others from our church family who have gathered together. And though we are, in one sense, very, very separated, that as a church family, as a worshiping community, we can still gather together and worship. And so welcome tonight to our Tenebrae service, or our service of shadows. It's a tradition that goes back to about the 4th century as a contemplative and meditative time, designed to help Christians deepen their understanding of the crucifixion. For us, I hope that as you leave tonight with that feeling of darkness, what it might be to live in a world without the light of Christ, that when you come back on Sunday morning and we celebrate the resurrection, you will have some sense of the amazing joy and strength that we have as believers in the risen Lord. I pray that you would take time during the service to contemplate the immense cost it was for God in Jesus to come and to take the full brunt of our sin and our rebellion upon himself, to really take that into his body and take it into death. There'll be no benediction tonight. The service will simply end. And then we'll gather again on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Pray with me. God is light, and in you there is no darkness at all. Jesus Christ is the light of the world. And yet this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world and we love darkness rather than light.
Judas, who betrayed Jesus, came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, asked them, "Who is it you want?" Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. They all drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, Who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they said. Then Simon Peter drew a sword and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus commanded Peter, Put your sword away. Shall I not do my Father's will? The soldiers and the Jewish officials bound Jesus and brought him first to Annas. Caiaphas advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people.
Simon Peter and the other disciple were following Jesus to the high priest's courtyard. A servant girl asked Peter, You aren't one of his disciples too, are you? Peter replied, I am not. It was cold, and Peter was standing with them, warming himself around the fire. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus. I've spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest.
Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, You aren't one of his disciples too, are you? He denied it, saying, I am not. One of the high priest's servants challenged him, Didn't I see you with him in the garden? And again Peter denied it, and at that moment a rooster began to crow.
Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus to the palace of the Roman governor. Pilate asked, What charges are you bringing against this man? He is a criminal, they replied. Pilate then went back inside the palace and asked Jesus, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. He went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? They shouted back, No, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising.
Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Once more Pilate came out. "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate, he was even more afraid and said to Jesus, "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin."
From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them just to be crucified. I have to leave. This is just too much.
So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, divided them into 4 shares, with the undergarment remaining. This garment was woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here's your son." And to the disciple, "Here's your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. This is an awful lot. I need to leave.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measures, that he should give his only Son to make the wretch his treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns his face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon his shoulders. Ashamed I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished.
later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that Scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.
Surely he took up our infirmaries and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And the punishment that brought us peace was upon him. And by his wounds we are healed.